I'll share my screen for us to get started here in just a minute. Okay, we'll give it another minute before we start.
Joe, I plan to introduce Jim if that's all right.
Okay, that's great. Let me go through the introduction and then we'll do that. We'll give it a minute though for more folks to join. Okay, I have 10:31 on my clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our monthly meeting of Citizens Climate Lobby Houston Chapter. This is Joe Garfunkel, the chapter leader. And for our agenda today, we wanted to introduce any of our new members that have joined the call. And we do have a special guest, Jim Blackburn. Following Jim's speech, we're going to go into our monthly calling campaign. We'll cover some miscellaneous topics in our slide deck. We'll go through our status reports from the 5 letters. And then time permitting, we may go into breakout sessions for more discussion. And so, Mark, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and introducing Jim for us.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I'll be glad to welcome and introduce Jim. Jim's an environmental lawyer and planner. He's also a professor in the practice of environmental law and sustainable design at Rice University, co-director of severe storm prevention, education, and evacuation from Disaster Center at Rice. He's a faculty scholar at the Baker Institute. Jim's written 2 books, The Book of Texas Days and A Texan Plan for the Texas Coast. And he's co-authored a 3rd recent book of poems and artwork called Birds, a Book of Verse and Vision. He's also founded the BioCity Initiative, focused on community recovery and long-term flood projection post-Harvey for Houston. Today, Jim's going to talk to us about nature-based climate solutions. Jim, we're proud to have you, and take it away.
I'm going to stop sharing. Jim, feel free to go ahead and share your slide deck. Thank you.
Okay, let me go ahead and get that up. Okay.
We can see it now.
You can see it now. Perfect. Get it over here. Okay, well, very good. Well, thanks for having me today. I am really happy to be here and talking about something that I'm very passionate about, which is nature-based carbon dioxide capture and storage. And thought I'd just go through some of the basics about it and kind of set a little background. You know, it is, I think in association with your interest in setting a fee or a cost or a charge for carbon, this is, I think, a perfect complement to that, because as the price of carbon goes up, I think you'll see nature becoming more and more kind of utilized as a potential capture and storage mechanism. I want to just start off with just a glimpse at the latest IPCC report. Current projections show us not making near the progress that we should. The orange cone is kind of we're under current nationally determined NDCs that they are offering by various countries. We're not going to get anywhere close to where we need to be. And if anything, there was an increased urgency about the need to act that came out of this recent report. I'm going to read it in much more detail to see how nature-based is integrated into it. I haven't had a chance to do that, but I think that all the signals I see is obviously we need to do more and we need to do it sooner. And I just start with that. I've done a lot of different work involving carbon dioxide emissions, and Houston's the center of carbon dioxide emissions probably in the world. I looked at 15 companies that have a strong presence in Houston, and it's kind of fascinating to me to see the tonnage that they produce. These 15 companies had over 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions, scope 1, scope 2 direct emissions. If you throw in scope 3, these 15 companies were responsible for about 2.5 billion metric tons. And globally, we're looking at 38 billion metric tons. So 15 Houston companies have a pretty significant presence. Now, this is I think a normal spread of what you might see as where we're going to be kind of looking to find our carbon emission reductions or our drawdowns from the atmosphere. And, renewables will certainly have a key piece. Efficiency will be a key piece. Natural gas switching from coal to natural gas will be a part of that strategy. But the point I wanted to make here is between nature and technological carbon capture, it's estimated that 35, perhaps as much as 40% of that contribution will come from carbon capture and storage, either by nature or by technology. And it's that nature piece that I'm really interested in. If you think of, say, 40 billion tons of carbon emissions on the international scale, 10% of that would be 4 billion tons, 20% would be 8 billion. So, 14%, somewhere in the 6 billion ton range that nature will be contributing to this. And I don't think many people have much of an idea of how nature might do that. Now, if you look at different emissions, scope 1 is what basically the direct emissions that all of the companies have, practically that each of us have. Scope 2 is emissions from electricity, and scope 3 are indirect emissions. And there's all sorts of remedies to or mitigation measures for carbon emissions for scopes 1 and 2. You can have efficiency, you can have renewables, as well as you can have direct carbon capture and storage, technological capture and storage. And same with scope 2. But once you get to scope 3, and then there are those that want to be net negative, you're going to have to be taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And there's not many alternatives that'll take it out of the atmosphere. When you hear of carbon capture and storage, most people are talking about taking it out of stacks and then pumping it into deep geologic formations. There's a lot of that going on the Texas coast right now. But when you're talking about taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, you're talking about, from a technological standpoint, direct air capture, which is like a vacuum cleaner for the sky. These facilities are massive, and it's going to be very hard to scale this type of technology to, frankly, clean the atmosphere of the world. But that's what many people are talking about. And this is, at this point in time, extremely expensive, probably in the $300 to $900 a ton range. You're talking about a price for carbon. That's a high price for carbon at $300 to $900 a ton. Clearly, with technological breakthroughs and with beginning to have mass manufacturing of facilities, you can bring costs down. But these costs are going to be high. And then the other alternative is photosynthesis. And I've got to tell you, one of the most amazing things I've run across is how little some very sophisticated companies understand nature. Photosynthesis is probably the best technology ever evolved, ever developed. If I had patented photosynthesis, I think it would be a lot easier to work with nature than the way it is. It's free, it's open to all of us, and it's really a matter of our creativity and imagination to understand and learn how to use nature. Most of our companies aren't used to thinking of nature as a solution. Nature is generally thought of as an enemy. Endangered species stop projects, wetland stop projects. Seldom has the environment ever enabled a project or a corporation's future. So it's a very interesting just concept to begin to think of nature as a technology, if you will, which is exactly how we ought to be thinking about it. Now, there's different ways to use nature. And I don't recommend all of these alternatives, but they're out there. Some people give credits for avoiding cutting down the timber that you see in this image, avoided conversion. That it's probably valid where there's a real threat to the timber, but this is really not about bringing more carbon down. It is about really preserving a carbon stock that has already been sequestered. It's valid, but it's of a different type than a drawdown from the atmosphere. Second type of credit is an agricultural credit. A lot of interest in reducing the amount of nitrogen that is used on a crop to reduce N2O emissions. N2O is a very potent greenhouse gas that is a side effect of nitrogen fertilizer use. It's essentially a credit here for emission avoidance, but it relates to more effective, more efficient farming methods, but some call this a nature-based credit. Again, it is not something that I really think, I don't think it's illegitimate. I just don't think that that's really the nature-based credit that I'm interested in focusing on. I am CEO of a nonprofit called B Carbon that's in the nature-based carbon credit registry business, if you will. And what we are interested in is certifying drawdown and storage of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere initially into the soil. We are talking about the actual capture and removal of carbon dioxide and measurement of it, and essentially registration of it, keeping up with it, accounting for it. Now, that root system that you see in front of you is the root system of native prairies. Those are carbon pumps. The roots themselves are carbon. So carbon dioxide is formed or taken out of the atmosphere, turned into carbohydrate, and then converted into root mass. That's carbon storage. As well as there's a transfer of carbohydrates from the root system into the microorganisms in the soil, and over a long-term time, a buildup of carbon in the soil itself. As long as you don't plow, this carbon will remain in place for significantly long times. Certainly decades, there's no question about that. Hundreds and even thousands of years are certainly, possible without subsurface disturbance. Now, once you come in and plow, plowing is sort of the enemy of soil carbon, and it can be a major problem. We don't want oxygen coming in and oxidizing and turning that carbohydrate back into carbon dioxide with the help of microorganisms. Now, at one time, there was a Chicago Carbon Exchange, and they put this map of the United States together, and the areas in yellow, they thought had a potential of sequestering 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide per acre per year. And the areas in blue had the potential at 0.4 of a ton per acre per year. There certainly are differences in the sequestration rates in the drier areas and the wetter areas. There's also soil type differences. Now, this is the incredibly general, simplistic map that came out of the Chicago Exchange back around the turn of the century. And we're looking to at a very different type of metric today. Again, looking at this root system, these are 1-year-old prairie plants from Texas. Look at that root system. That's much more than a ton of carbon dioxide per acre per year. Cattle can be positive. I know that there's a lot of negative thoughts about cattle, but our prairies were formed in the presence of grazing animals. And there are ways to graze that you can actually increase carbon sequestration. Regenerative management, adaptive multi-paddock grazing. These are some of the peer-reviewed literature results. That 11.9 tons per acre per year, I think, is aberrant. But I think, in the range from 3 to 4.5 tons per acre per year is reasonable to expect with regenerative grazing. Now, you talk about a price of carbon. Right now, these carbon credits that are, in our case, tested, highly rigorous, kind of provable, if you will, carbon credits are going for $20 to $25 per metric ton. If there were a higher price for carbon, the price of carbon were set at $51 a ton. I think, like the Biden administration has stated, they think the price of carbon currently is. We would see a lot of transactions at the $40 to $50 range for nature-based carbon. A lot of landowners could make significantly more money than they're making now by converting to becoming carbon farmers. And to optimize for carbon is an option that every rancher and every farmer has. But right now, there's no market incentive to do that. All of the incentives are to even overgraze, but certainly to use practices, plowing that release carbon dioxide. I had a funny discussion with an oil company executive not too long ago, and he said, I went past an area where they were plowing a field, and all I could think about was carbon emissions from the field. Now, for an oil and gas executive to admit to having those types of thoughts is a very different conversation than we could have had 2 years ago. The point here is that there are ways to change grazing practices to significantly increase carbon sequestration in grasslands. Similarly, with forests, we have a tremendous opportunity to sequester carbon dioxide in forests. We can manage forests better. And our forests do put a lot of carbon dioxide into the wood. Pine forest is among the most prolific at upwards of 5 tons of carbon dioxide per acre per year. Bottomland hardwoods, upland hardwoods, between 3.5, around 3.5 tons per acre per year. But look at the two down at the bottom, mesquite and juniper. That's the cedar of the hill country and mesquite of South Texas. And those are pretty big numbers. We are double and triple checking all of these numbers. These come from Texas A&M. We need to check, and you've got issues of 100% cover to get these types of numbers. If you don't have 100% cover, then you're going to have to subtract across these. But we're looking into forest sequestration. We're trying to understand timber and cutting timber, and the fact that if we follow the timber or the cut lumber into the sawmill and all the way into the architectural application and keep track of it with blockchain technology, a company that pays for timber credits could actually follow their carbon all the way into an architectural solution that would sequester the carbon dioxide for another 50 to 75 years at a minimum. So we're looking at an incredible, interesting kind of record-keeping system. Here's just some individual data for individual trees over a 30-year lifetime of an oak. We're looking at about 5 tons of carbon dioxide takedown. We're experimenting. We just have a project with Texas Coastal Exchange where we're taking money from a company that wanted to sequester carbon, and we're paying the Houston Parks Department to plant trees in low-income minority areas that don't have enough trees. And these are in areas they won't be disturbed, and we believe that they will be providing carbon dioxide benefits for 20, 30, 40 years into the future. We think that's an excellent solution. We formed this nonprofit called B Carbon, and I'll just tell you a few words about it. We are a certifier. We take project developers or project applications, we review them. We basically have a methodology that was approved by a stakeholder group, and we issue credits based on these applications and based on representations that are made by the landowners and contractual agreements that we have with the landowners. The landowner works with the project developer. Most of the project developers set up the buy-sell with the buyers. We are not involved in any of that, but we verify that what they are proposing actually works. We require testing as a precondition to qualification. We do not issue any credits if there's no testing. And we have a true up process where a second round of testing comes in, usually after 5 years is what we're proposing. We may do it quicker than that, but that's up really to the individual entities. And our credits will be based on the drawdown that is accumulating in the soil itself or later in timber. This came out of work we did at Speed Center at Rice, which is the severe storm center. We were looking for ways to pay landowners to set aside land to be flooded by hurricane storm surge. We've got about 6 million low-lying acres along the Texas coast. We don't want to see them develop, but you're not going to regulate to keep that from happening in Texas. But we might pay the landowners for sequestering carbon. And we checked into the, and this is the low-lying areas we're talking about along the Texas coast, the 0 to 15 feet down south, because they've got a little different surge profile. Up in our area, 0 to 20 feet, collectively about 6 million acres. That area should not be developed. Some of it is already, but if we can keep the landowners with cash flow, we'd be in a lot better shape in terms of the future development profile. The problem we ran across is the current international system does not work. It comes out of the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, totally non-functional. And so basically our assessment in looking at it at Speed Center was that Kyoto didn't work. So we went over to the Baker Institute, and I'm a faculty scholar over there, and we formed a stakeholder group to take a look at how we could maybe come up with a different system. And we came up with, over a period of about a year, we started off with 40 stakeholders. We now have over 400. And we are basically developing and have developed our own carbon certification standard that works for Texas landowners. And that is measured, is based on measurement as opposed to computer modeling. And it basically looks to market as a solution where price, it becomes such an important thing. So again, I think the overlap here is having a price for carbon and having a willingness to pay landowners to draw down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, I think is in the long term going to be the quickest, fastest path to scale. These are some of the stakeholders that we have. We have the state of North Dakota, the state of New Mexico, Texas Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and others. We have 11 principles we've developed. We're big on protecting private property rights. We're big on working with landowners. We're big on testing. But principle 11 is one I wanted to draw particular attention to. And that is we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program as well. We want to develop a soil carbon credit trading program that embraces diversity, is equitable, and inclusive of people, power, and culture, recognizing that this is an ongoing process. We're setting up meetings with Prairie View to try to integrate the Prairie View outreach program into an educational training program to try to help those with diverse backgrounds to participate in this whole process that we've set up. This is kind of what that world of carbon trading looks like, where somebody like B Carbon is a certifier. Assemblers come to us. Essentially, we certify the credits that go to the buyers. And then the buyers, we don't get put into the money chain. We have a fee that we charge for processing, but the money goes from the buyers back to the assemblers and landowners. We verify everything. Landowners, the key, we don't want plowing. We think of soil carbon as a product just like potatoes. If you grow it, you can sell it. But rigorous testing has to go with this. And this is that testing down on Lois Neary's ranch in Matagorda County. This is what we hope to transform, an overgrazed wildlife desert into a restored native prairie. We did this across the United States, across our grazing lands. We think it 500 million to 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide drawdown from the atmosphere would be possible. And last slide, we think there's tremendous potential. We're losing a lot of water on the western side of the Ogallala Aquifer up through the Midwest. All of that land could be converted back to grazing with native plants. And there's a huge opportunity there. There's 200 million acres in the United States that's used to grow corn and maize for cattle feeding. We think that a lot of that land could be changed back to grazing. So in the long term, if we develop the market like we think it is, we believe there will be massive land use change to support sequestering carbon, but only if the landowners receive income from essentially these change practices. Otherwise, not going to happen. That's a quick summary. Mark, I think that ought to give you a good overview. And with that, I'll be happy to stop sharing and to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Jim. If you have a question, I have a couple that some people gave me ahead of time, but if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or you can just verbally ask it.
Yeah, Mark, I'll go ahead and start. And thank you, Jim. That was really fascinating information that you shared. So from what you know, in your opinion, what is the next step to try to make this something that really works?
Well, I think the buyers are not comfortable with nature yet. So I think one thing would be, is that embracing and endorsing, and let me start. The companies, whether they're energy companies, manufacturing, retail, they're all worried about greenwashing or being accused of greenwashing. So certainly to have nature-based credits and different systems of nature-based, both endorsed by and supported by the environmental community would be, I think, one thing that could be very positive. I would tell you that there is probably more uncertainty in the corporate world right now about what to do. They all know they have to do something. Many of them have, I would say, multiple plans on the table. We're having conversations with oil and gas companies. We're having conversations with retailers that would have been unthinkable even a year ago. I mean, this is developing incredibly fast, and they don't have a guidebook. There's no blueprint as to how to move forward with a quote unquote responsible carbon plan. And so many of those companies are unsure about these nature credits. There's no workable standard. There's an international standard that was set up for trade between countries. Gold standard, Vera, CAR, all kind of derived off of those, but they don't work. They're dysfunctional for most landowners because they're incredibly difficult to qualify for. And most of the Texas landowners just are, kind of too ornery to deal with, that much bureaucracy, period. So it needs to be a practical system. And there just hadn't been a lot of attention to that yet. And of course, practical is not always what we're good at from a, if you will, from a legal standpoint. Those are just some thoughts about that. But it is a chaotic marketplace right now with a lot of mixed signals, a lot of credits that are not good, that are out there with credits that are very good. So it's in a very interesting time period.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answered your question, Joe.
Yeah, Wakar. Go ahead, Joe. Wakar.
Okay, yeah, hi. Wakai Qureshi. So I had just a follow-up question on just what you were talking about, Jim, about the buyers. So right now, is the incentive that the buyers have their own self-imposed metrics for, showing that they're reducing carbon, rather than any financial incentive that they have? So they're trying to do the right thing and showing that they're doing the right thing. I mean, is that most of the buyers, or do some of them actually have a financial incentive for purchasing these carbon credits?
Yeah, I think some of them do have a financial system. I would say that there's several things going on. I mean, when I first started, I've been working on this in this area since about 2010, 2011 time period. And I've watched the websites of the companies. And of course, the companies began to make statements on their websites. And those statements have gotten more and more kind of serious over time. So on the one hand, there's sort of the public relations side of it. They want to put a good face forward. But in 2020, in January of 2020, BlackRock Financial changed their kind of thinking about carbon. And they basically said they were going to start voting their multi-trillion-dollar investment group. And they were going to start voting their shares for corporate practices that were carbon positive. This led to what's a lot of people call the ESG movement, environmental social governance movement. And so now there is a really an emerging financial basis for every company, in that if you want to borrow money for drilling projects, for any type of project, really, there is a requirement that there be an ESG plan and a carbon drawdown plan associated with that. More recently, like Monday of this week, the Securities and Exchange Commission has just issued reporting rules, proposed reporting rules that have just created a huge amount of controversy. And you're beginning to see the financial industry and the energy industry kind of almost going head on about disclosure, about what's the scope 3 emissions. And so I would tell you, it started off as public relations. There is now both banking and financial requirements that are, at the least, they want to see what your carbon plan is before they loan money. I mean, I can't tell you how many phone calls I've had where, if you'll excuse my language, the opening statement from the person calling is, "Hey, Blackburn, what's this ESG shit and how do I deal with it?" I mean, these are old oil and gas, types that all of a sudden are being hit with stuff, and that's financial. And so the financial squeeze is beginning to occur. And if that continues, I think you're going to see an incredible change by 2025. And I think you'll see a lot of emissions reductions by 2030. Same thing's true with stockholder or shareholder initiatives. Engine number one that led to 3 new board members at ExxonMobil. I mean, that type of action is occurring with every major corporation. And I mean, I was talking to a general counsel for an oil and gas company the other day, and he said, "Blackburn, I really don't have much time to talk with you as much as I'd like to." He said, "I am fending off shareholder motions every day." And so, these types of actions are kind of like waves that are coming, and there's no question there's change.
Yeah,
and it's going to be massive.
No, thank you for fleshing all that out. I would say, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There is that incentive on companies, that individually they see the financial incentive, in terms of getting loans and so on to do their business. But overall, right now, right, it's still kind of voluntary. So if you look at the whole system, is the whole system making more money? I'm not sure that they are. And it really argues for a carbon price, which you mentioned before, that would really make this really just fly and make it really real to me.
One of the interesting things on the SEC reporting proposal is, among other things, they're asking, again, these are proposed rules, they're not implemented yet, but FCC was asking each company that filed to lay out, do you have an internal price of carbon that you're using? And if so, how are you using that internal price of carbon? And I thought that was a really interesting disclosure kind of concept, because it's one thing to have an internal price of carbon, but how are they using it is really important. Because, you know, if you can't get a payback with carbon at a certain price, are you basically not pursuing projects? I mean, that becomes very important.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Joe, I think we're about at our time limit. Is that correct?
Let's see, it's 11:05. I think we have time for a few more questions if anyone has others. John Glover.
Okay.
John, you're on mute.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So Jim, I want to make sure I understand these companies, especially if they're oil companies, they do understand, don't they, that this is a one-time sequester of like increasing the forest and everything that to sequester carbon. This is a one-time thing, whereas emissions from drilling for oil and gas are a continuing source of emissions. So they do understand that, right? This is
Well,
one.
it is not. If you the drawdowns that I was talking about were in terms of tons of carbon dioxide per year. So those grasslands are pulling down 2 to 3 tons of carbon dioxide every year. So at least the drawdown is the nature-based drawdown is continuing over time. And so the emissions.
Explain to me how where is it going then?
It goes into the ground. It is being accumulated in the soil, and we can measure it. And that's what we're actually doing. That's what, when I talked about testing, we put down a test at time 0, and then we have a true up process. And that carbon is being increased every year. Same thing with the tree that's growing.
Well, except for the tree that's growing, there's a point where the tree dies and stops growing. A tree grown to full maturity can sequester just so much, and that's it. And then if you had a forest that was full of those trees, that forest has now reached its sequestering potential and can do no more. So how the grasslands any different?
The grasslands can increase the height of the soil, and they can increase the carbon content within the soil. So, in particularly wetlands, wetlands actually grow with time. So you'll find essentially the marsh keeping up, for example, with settlement, with resedimentation. In the soil column, there is just an additional, you just adding carbon to the subsurface, and a lot of pore space in there. And when we're talking about minute amounts, if you think of it in relative scale, it's like putting a cup of coffee. And if you take, your cup that you, scoop your coffee out with and put it into your coffee maker, put a cup of that like on a tabletop full of dirt. That's the amount of carbon we're talking about adding to, say, a meter deep across an acre in a year. And there's tremendous capacity. Now, we are trying to understand if you will, the plateau when that occurs and how it will occur. But we're measuring, and as long as there's growth and as long as there's increasing carbon content in the soil, those are annual increases. And we anticipate that'll be certainly decades of annual increases, if not, we've heard 80 years. The amazing thing is there's just not a lot of good carbon measurements out there. U.S. Department of Agriculture has studied everything you can imagine about soils except for carbon. And they don't have a great soil carbon database. So that's why we're so big on testing. And we're working with Carrie Masiello over in the Earth Sciences Department at Rice, and she's a soil carbon expert. And we've got people from all over the world that are basically trying to figure this out about what is a reasonable expectation of the holding capacity with regard to carbon. And it's substantial right now. Because we have basically depleted most of the carbon stocks in our grasslands by converting them to croplands and plowing them and basically removing that.
Yeah, so I agree. So it seems to me like it's a 1 century sort of thing. I mean, we really need to do this. Don't get me wrong. We really need to do this because we're way behind, and we need to do as much sequestering as we can right now. But it's not a long-term solution
Well, it's a
that would
bridge.
offset continuing emissions from fossil fuels.
It is a bridge. That is correct. And I think that the fossil fuel industry is either going to have to come up with something much better in the long term, or they've got a limited life ahead of them. But I think that's what they're all struggling with. I think that's what every one of them is, they certainly see everything that's going on as an existential threat and trying to make sense of how to go forward with that. The other part of it is too, let's just say you cut down, if you cut off all carbon emissions tomorrow, there's a lot of atmospheric carbon dioxide we need to draw down that's already there. And so this nature solution, I think, will go beyond probably the effective life of a lot of the emissions. Now, the interesting thing about, certainly the plants themselves, I mean, there is a massive move to get technological capture of the carbon dioxide at the stack level, and then basically put it in a pipeline and pump it underground. And there's a lot of that going on as well. And of course, that reduces emissions coming out of the stack itself, which is certainly beneficial. It's burning of the hydrocarbons in cars that are out and around. That becomes probably the most difficult of all of these sources to handle. And I think that's where most of the companies have not yet really admitted responsibility totally for scope 3 emissions. And that's going to be, I think, probably the battleground on all of this.
I think, do we have 2 more questions and then we'll cut it off there, I think. Anyone else?
Got one.
Hans, go ahead.
Yeah, I was fascinated by your discussion of livestock and how they graze. And I guess my understanding is the largest single aspect of the greenhouse gas footprint for livestock is, as you intimated, the agricultural land that is used to grow their feed, which is, huge. And I certainly see how, if you could transition that to a more free range grazing situation, I certainly see the climate benefits of that, but I'm struggling to see how that could work unless you just dramatically increase the acreage that's used for such grazing. And I'm trying to balance all of this out. Could you speak to that a little bit in terms of how you see that overall balancing playing out?
Well, I think it comes back to price. Right now, I mean, I'm trying to get a good understanding of, say, how much money a corn farmer makes growing corn or sorghum for cattle feed purposes. And if we can generate more income from them converting back to grassland and free range grazing, if for example, they use regenerative grazing, we're able to generate, say, 3.5 tons, 4 tons of carbon dioxide per acre per year. If we, right now, the European price is $60 or 60 euros a ton. If you could generate 4 times 60, $240 per acre per year, gross income, I figure you have to probably pay a project developer 15%. But if a farmer could clear $200 an acre per year by converting back to grassland, I can promise you there'd be a lot of grassland conversion, particularly in these areas that are running short of water. So again, I think you combine water shortage with a good price for carbon, and I think you could see a lot of differences. I mean, we're having a lot of people tell us that, frankly, if they make $50 an acre, they're lucky. And, you can bump that by a ton an acre at $50 a ton. That's doubling almost the amount of money they make per year. So again, I think your focus on price is well placed. And I think it's all about really recognizing, I think when you emphasize price of carbon, then you emphasize the role of nature. These natural ecosystems have value and are quite important.
One more
Okay,
question from anybody? I
Yeah.
have a, Mark, go ahead. You had one?
Yeah, Jim, this is certainly a shift from the nature-based sequestration. But since we're interested in getting a carbon fee in our country, do you think the Baker Institute might have an interest either in supporting or endorsing a carbon fee?
You know, Baker Institute's real careful about endorsing anything. You know, I mean, you know, of course, James Baker has taken a position on trying to get a carbon tax. And as far as I know, they've never, even though the Institute's named after James Baker, I don't think they have taken a formal position one way or another. So I would say probably not. Just given the way the Baker Institute kind of functions, I think they think of themselves much more as a convening entity than a advocacy entity. I'm sometimes surprised they let me hang around over there.
All right, should we wrap it up, Joe?
Yeah, we would. Jim, this was fascinating. Thank you so much. And before you go, if it's okay, we always like to take a group photo. If we can ask everyone to turn on your cameras, and so we can get everybody with a big smile.
Got everybody?
I think we have everybody. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Good.
Let me just make sure that came out okay. Yep, I got it.
Well, very
All right,
good.
thank you so much. And Jim, feel free to stay on, but if you need to, go ahead and drop off.
I'm going to take off and do some things. I'm actually going to be writing a paper. So thank you for having me, and sorry for missing last time. And again, thanks for giving me a chance to make it up to you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share the slide deck again. All right, and now we're up to the section in our monthly meeting where we do our calling campaign. Mark, you want to lead us?
Sure. Yeah, so for anybody who's not familiar with this, we do have in Citizens Climate Lobby a monthly calling campaign to our legislators in Washington. And to be a part of that, you can see the first link there. You can join that, and basically they give you a reminder once a month, hey, it's time to call your senators and your representatives. And they have a script that you can follow on your call. Usually it's leaving a voicemail message. We're gonna do actual call today, a live call, and I can put that link in the chat. So there it is, and I'm going to demonstrate, just help people who haven't done it. And so I'm going to call the two senators first, and I would ask everybody to put yourselves on mute and do that also while I'm doing it. And just a tip, sometimes their voicemail is full on that national number. There's some local numbers. I can put those in the chat also.
I'll put those numbers in the chat for you, Mark, so you can demo the call.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, this is Senator Cornyn.
Hello, this is Senator John Cornyn. Thanks for calling my Washington, D.C. office. For general information regarding my office locations and operating hours, please press 1. To leave a comment regarding current issues of interest, please press 2. If you'd like I appreciate the time to make your issues of interest to. Please leave your comment as well as your local zip code after the tone. Thank you and have a great day.
Hello, Senator Cornyn. My name's Mark Harrinan. I live in 77080 in Houston. I'm calling to urge your support of a federal price on carbon so US businesses can be able to compete with other companies in the Europe border tariff and remain internationally competitive. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention for the new members, on the weekend, nobody's going to answer the phone when you call them. And it's just super easy just to leave a voice message. Did everybody find the web link to get to the website with the instructions on how to make the calls? Okay. All right. So Mark is going to continue with his. And then at this point, we'll just go ahead and make our own calls. And Mark, if you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute also. Thank you, everybody.
So it seems like Cruise National Line is not taking messages. I put in the chat a local number. You can try that.
Looks like everybody's pretty much done. I'm going to share my screen again and we'll continue on. And thank you so much, everybody, for making those calls. It really helps quite a bit. All right. Whoops. Wrong button. So the next slide here that we have in our meeting, this is another type of method that we use to contact our members of Congress. On this slide, it's showing the president, senators, and the House. And this is a new campaign to go ahead and send an email. So I just put that link in the chat window again. I'm going to let me copy and paste it one more time. And if everybody wouldn't mind just taking another 2 minutes to go ahead now and do an email. Let me put this in there again. Okay. Can everybody see that? The very last web link that I just put into the chat. And I'll just give it one more minute and then we'll continue on. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. So I also like to place all of the other links for today's meeting into the chat window, and I've done that already. So one of those links is a link to the slide deck we're looking at right now to make it easier for everyone to look back at what we covered. And in the slide deck, there are always lots of links. So there you go. That second link right there has the link to the actual slide deck that we're reviewing now. Okay, something that also occurs on this Saturday is that following our meeting, there is always the CCL National. I'm sorry, let me take that back. I'm talking about the wrong slide. So let me start over again. For everyone who's already a member, earlier this week, there was a weekly briefing email that went out. And one of the things that it talked about was that CCL National testified in front of the Senate. I think the date was March 31st. And as part of that testimony about climate change and the effect of having a carbon price with carbon dividends, there was a document that was created and submitted. And this is actually the written testimony to the Senate, which I thought was very, very interesting. And so that link will take you to the full document. I've just copied and pasted a snippet of that. But one of the things that's occurring right now, if you've been watching the news, is that with the war in Ukraine, we've now come to a point where some people are asking us to double down on fossil fuels, really, or alternatively, of course, other folks like ourselves are asking for an acceleration of the transition to clean energy. So there's a very interesting discussion taking place in the public media right now about that. And so this full document that you can get to if you go to the link that's there has all of the details that Citizens Climate Lobby shared in front of the Senate in March. So I thought that was really fascinating. Okay, another slide we have here. This was from Marco. Marco, are you still on? are still here with the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so this was your slide, and there was a question last month about how do we find our member of Congress, our representatives? And I know that you did a lot of research. If you want to just take us through the slide that you created here.
Oh, well, yeah, I think it's a pretty self-explanatory. I mean, like just the next time I vote, I think I'll save a lot of time if I go through this and just quickly be able to see in one page, you know, who represents me, and specifically, you know, who represents starting in the highest hierarchy. Like you would have president, but then Senate and Congress, and you can see that it takes you to maps that show, you know, your area and which districts you're in. Senate, Congress, state, the Texas State Senate, Texas State House, and then finally the Texas State Board of Education. Those were just, you know, 5 different classifications of representatives that I you know, I was probably aware about before, but had forgotten about, and I just liked to putting everything together in one page so I could quickly remember every time I vote. There was a couple lists that we found that rate the representatives. Unfortunately, it's only for I believe the Texas Senate.
The Texas legislature, but the Texas House and Texas Senate, that's from the Sierra Club there.
Right, yeah, and it didn't give ratings for like really local people like the State Board of Education. And
correct.
Yeah. So, but you know, you find out what you can.
Yeah, this was very good, and thank you, Marco, for doing this. And just to add on to that, now with the redistricting, the new congressional district maps that were voted on here in Texas by the Texas legislature, for some people, your member of Congress has changed. And for example, that's what happened with me. Previously, I was in Dan Crenshaw's district, and now I was moved into Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. So for anyone that's confused, like myself originally, that first list at the very top there, the texas.gov, that's very helpful. All right, any questions from anybody about this? Okay, we'll go on. And thank you again, Marco, for doing that.
Sure.
The next slide here, this is something that I've been including in the past few meetings. There's a new initiative from the CCL Third Coast region, which we're a member of. The CCL Third Coast includes Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana, to start a project called 2022 Texas Teen Climate Champions. And so this project is looking for volunteers to help out with various portions of that project for outreach really to teens. That's talking about middle and high school primarily, looking for teachers to help connect with youth at schools and others to help with presentations and so on. So if anybody might be interested in that, the web link is there for Bob Hendricks, just to drop him a mail. Okay, and this is the slide that I started talking about a little bit prematurely, but we're now on that slide now. So immediately after this meeting at noon Central Time, we have a CCL National Monthly Speaker. And for today, that person is Keisha Austin, is a member of the organization called Rewiring America. And her organization is working to launch a movement to electrify everything, starting with our nation's 121 million households. So that'll be at noon today, and the link is here to join that video meeting. And I think that'll be a very interesting presentation. Okay, going on, we're now up to the section where we go through our 5-letter status reports for the lobby team, grass tops, grassroots, media, and chapter development. Starting with lobby team for John Seagren.
He's hosting his UN students today.
Oh, okay. I forgot he was not going to be here. So I'll read through the slide then for John. So the very first bullet point he has there, that's the EICDA, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So as of today, there were 96 co-sponsors in the United States House that are co-sponsoring that. And as time goes by and through our activities, that number keeps growing. So we're making great efforts there. John mentioned here that for a legislative update, we have inflationary concerns now that are putting climate measures in jeopardy. There are still discussions going on in Washington, D.C. about what to do about climate. I know there are negotiations taking place. Senator Manchin is still a big part of that, and things are up in the air. But then in addition, we have our June conference, which is taking place in person in Washington, D.C. And for anyone that would like to schedule a lobby meeting with our representatives, I'm really referring to our liaisons who are responsible for scheduling those meetings. John mentioned just feel free to schedule it before the mid-June conference if you're not planning on visiting Washington, D.C. Hans, I know you're on the call and you were thinking about going to Washington. Any thoughts on that you want to add?
Well, yeah, I probably am. We have an in-person meeting set with Hannah Anderson, who is Dan Crenshaw's energy and environmental aide, on June the 10th. I forgot the date now. I have to look it up. But anyhow, it's the Monday. Actually, it's before the conference is over, but that's the day that she was available. So I went ahead and took it. It's the last day of the conference that afternoon. We have a meeting set up with her, and I'm going to try to get the O2 lobby team together pretty soon and start talking about that.
Excellent.
I know a couple of you said would be able to go. I'm sure everybody can't go, and so we'll start that planning process pretty soon.
Very good. And John Glover, what are your plans for Representative Fletcher? John, are you on mute? I can't see. Is John still on the call? Maybe he dropped off.
The call, but he's on mute.
Okay. John, did you want to come off mute? Okay, I'm going to continue on. We can
Okay, I got it
There
here.
he is.
Oh,
There he
sorry.
is.
All right.
I got too many screens up. I got two screens, but then I have windows all over the place, so I can't find you. No, yeah, I'm planning on scheduling a meeting, but the advice we've been getting is not to schedule, not to try too soon. And since I've had trouble getting her before, I thought I would pause on it. We've also got to find that they recommend that if you want to meet, you want to have several people, 3 or 4 people in the meeting or something. And right now I haven't gotten other constituents from Texas 7 that I know that are going. Does anybody out there know anybody in Texas 7? Are they going to the conference?
Hey, John, if it helps, I'm going to be in Texas 7 after the redistricting, and I am planning to go to the conference.
Oh, okay. Well, then would you like to, if I get this meeting arranged, would you like to go?
Sure. Well, it'd be easy for me to go if it's on the Monday right after the conference, as long as it doesn't conflict with the meeting with Crenshaw. So it just depends on how many days I have to stay there to go to the meeting.
Yeah,
but I would like to. I mean, I'd be happy to do it if we can work it out.
I thought the meeting date. Let me get to it here on my calendar. Let's see. The conference, the lobby day is supposed to be on Tuesday. Monday is still part of the conference, and so Tuesday is the day. It doesn't have to be. You meet when you can with them, but the proposed lobby day is Tuesday the 14th.
Okay, I could stay one extra day if that's needed. But I think the meeting that we have for Texas O2 Hans is on the Monday.
It's on the 13th. I just looked it up just to make sure I got the right date. It's the 13th at I think it's 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's the time. I mean, I'll go when she can meet with me, but right now there are breakout sessions at that time on Monday. So what they're saying is the conference is over on Monday, and so let Tuesday be your lobby day. And But since I don't have anybody going yet, you're the first one. So Wakar, whatever works for the two of us right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the approach I took. I mean, maybe I made a tactical error, but I told Hannah either Monday or Tuesday would work okay. And I wasn't that hung up on if it missed part of the conference to have an in-person meeting. I wasn't really trying to equate those two things, but
yeah, no, I agree with that. So I'll be asking the team that I've got here real soon, or any of them going, and does anybody want to meet? I think if they're just two people, that's okay. But they're recommending if you're gonna that she wouldn't want to meet with us unless there's a group of people.
John, what they typically do in Washington, I mean, your situation is not at all unusual. I mean, they like to have at least one constituent in this group, but if you don't have enough to populate, 5 or 6 people, it's kind of the preferred group. They assign people from other districts to attend that meeting. So there's a mechanism to take care of the situation you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, well, Carl, so you're not in Texas 7 now, but you will be, you're saying?
Yeah, I will be. Yes.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I think that's fair game.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one more thing for Hans and John and anyone else who's planning on going or knows of someone who's interested, that if there are students who need some financial assistance to defray a portion of the transportation travel expense, that we do have a somewhat of a budget available to help defray those costs for students that might need that would be interested in attending. So if you know of anybody who's interested and needs that financial assistance, please let me know.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm going to go on. Okay. Court for grass tops.
Hey, so right now the team's been helping to line up speakers, line up a fun meet and greet for later in May. And we have a statewide team that's working on an economist statement, an endorsement for a price on carbon. And so we'll be gearing that back up after a presentation that CCL Houston is doing in College Station. And as Mark will bring up, as we kind of step through these and building these relationships, sometimes it is, we do presentations more at the grassroots level or like chapter development level. But if there's someone in that audience who leans in and is a business leader, we might ask them directly, or they might feel empowered to take their initiatives to the next level with an endorsement. So at the end of the presentation, y'all might have noted how Mark asked directly to Jim Blackburn his thoughts on that endorsement. And so that is a function of the Grass Tops team. And so anyways, there's multiple ways to go about getting endorsements. And as the CCL Houston team works together to get these presentations, that's kind of how we get the ball rolling. So there's presentations. If anyone knows of a good group to do a presentation, just let either one of the lever leaders know, and we can try to get that ball rolling. Specifically, I thought it might be interesting to reach out to the 22 candidates with 3 climate questions, and that like they would fill out, and we could just add that to our knowledge material so that we can make a very well educated vote for the upcoming elections. And there's runoffs in May. So I was hoping to have this done for May, but if that's not a good timeline, then I think we could definitely have it done by November. So that's a little mini project. And then as we've been working on this economist statement, I think Joe had a great idea to extend it to other types of professors or kind of like wheelhouses. So I noted that University of Houston has an energy institute, and like their slogan is use your energy to change energy. We dare you. And so maybe this college at the University of Houston would be a good launch off point to kind of tap into this growing field for educating upcoming career seekers. So if anyone wants to attend our next Crosstops meeting, which is where we get together, sometimes we'll watch a video or we'll just talk about different Crosstops topics. I'm including my email in the chat. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Court. And one more thought I had, the 3 climate questions project that sounded very good. And while you're working on that, remember that during the last election, we held a couple of candidate forums where we invited candidates in different, that were running for different positions to join us and to really talk to us about what their positions are. If there are any candidates that are interested, we would certainly like to do that again, I think, to have another candidate forum.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Court. Okay, I'm going to go on. And Mark for grassroots.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, so we have several things coming up in the next month, including tomorrow. So a number of us have signed up for a shift, which is between 12 and 5 tomorrow on Discovery Green, downtown Houston. And so what we're going to do, people stop by our table. We have a number of handouts, both English and Spanish. We're going to ask them to write or call their representatives, ask them to join CCL, join our local group. We have a flyer explaining the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is the main legislation that we're promoting as Citizens Climate Lobby. And we also have a way that they can donate to our group too. We have a flyer on that might appeal to conservative voters too, since Citizens Climate Lobby is nonpartisan. We encourage people of whatever political leanings to join us. Yeah, so we're looking forward. If you're new or if you're a member of our group already and want to get a taste of what tabling's like, just come and join us. We'll be glad to let you try your hand at speaking to a few members of the public. We also, a number of us are going to go to Texas A&M in a couple weeks, April 23rd. We've been invited by Move Texas. It's a group and also a CCL chapter at the A&M College to do a introductory presentation to college students at A&M. And our part in that presentation will be to inform them about Citizens Climate Lobby, what our goals are and how we work to achieve those goals. And then finally, May 1st, a couple of us are going to do a presentation for the Interfaith Environmental Group. And we were invited to do a presentation focusing on justice for all groups in the US in terms of our solution for climate change. So we'll touch on how the dividend will benefit lower income groups. And we're also going to talk about, from a faith perspective, the importance of including low income people, especially in the world, in our plans to get climate change under control, because they're the ones that are going to suffer the most. I believe that's it, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions for Mark about any of the upcoming events? Okay, I'm going to go on. And this is now the media team slide that where I'm the leader of that. So a couple of things here. As far as newsletters, so I have the link there for the prior newsletter we sent out on March 7th. And the most current newsletter we sent out on April 4th. Hopefully everybody found that in your inbox. And then as far as print media activities, we had a letter to the editor on March 14th submitted by John Segrin in response to, is the US polluting the air more than ever? I submitted one also on the same date on a different topic. Mine was in a response to Ann Bradbury. She's the CEO of a natural gas organization. And that was in response to Biden has opportunity to counter Putin with American energy. She was promoting natural gas. And so I responded to that. And then something very interesting, April 8th, that was yesterday. Occasionally we receive inquiries from various journalists, reporters on different topics. They want to find out what we're doing with climate change. And this was an example of one of those. I received an inquiry from a journalist named Andrew McCormick. He's deputy director of a organization called Covering Climate Now. And Dory joined me with that. And it was a very, very good discussion. He was primarily interested on gerrymandering in Texas and how that might be affecting our efforts at solving climate change. And we talked about all aspects of that, as well as other topics, other things that we're involved in. So that was very interesting, very good. And then on social media, you can find us at CCL Houston. I'm going to go on to the next slide, where I always like to include some examples of the current posts we've put out on our social media. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. I have a few pages. The one on the left I thought was very interesting. I always look for very interesting news related to climate change and renewable energy. The SPP org, that's a 14-state region that provides electricity. And they announced through a press release they put out that they served 90.2% of demand across its 14-state territory with renewable energy sources, and marked the first time that a region served more than 90% of its load with renewables. So I thought that was fascinating. And so I put that out there to our Texas Ledge and ERCOT. The one on the right there is, again, more impacts to Texas from climate change, wildfires in central Texas, burning thousands of acres due to increasing temperatures. And so I thought that was interesting. Other items, the one on the left here, another article that showed that in 2021, clean energy had 3 record-breaking things that occurred. US EV sales doubled in 2021. Private investment of renewables reached $105 billion, and an additional 37 gigawatts of new power generation were created out of a total of 45 new gigawatts. So very, very interesting things going on. On the right here is an example of how corporate America is doing their part to become more clean. This was the retailer called Target Stores. And they were highlighting one of their brand new stores in California, where they put lots and lots of solar panels covering the roof of their store and in the parking lot to make it completely, net zero in carbon emissions from that store. They were reaching all of their electrical needs from what they've done. And so I included the hashtags there for Walmart, Costco, Kroger, Home Depot, and Lowe's. And I thought that was another very interesting event that occurred there. On the left, something else, some new technology, lots of innovation going on. In California, they have a pilot project to install solar panel canopies over their water canals. California, being a Western state, has a severe drought. Their water is drying up. And one of the benefits of doing this is that it provides more room for installing more solar panels, and it reduces the evaporation rate of water. So very, very interesting. On the right, another, wind renewable event occurring. So New York State had an offshore wind auction, and you can see below the caption there below in the right there, that it attracted a record amount of money, people that were interested in buying up those leases. And so, my annotation there in the tweet, coming soon to the Gulf of Mexico, ? Don't know. On the left, we wanted to highlight the fact that we submitted one of our letters to the editor at the Houston Chronicle. And this was one that John Segrin had written about, doing something about greenhouse emissions, because the article he was responding to was alluding to the fact that there's really nothing we can do to solve climate change, and that's certainly not true. So, and then on the right, more evidence that even conservatives are really wanting, clean energy. And so reality check, red state Republican voters want clean energy too. Just ask Nebraska why, for the economic benefits and jobs. So, and then a couple more. I thought the one on the left here was very interesting. In Texas here, everybody, knows that Texas depends on oil and gas, and how oil and gas goes to the state of Texas, but that's not necessarily true anymore. According to this research article that I found, that going back to 1981, oil and gas did contribute 21% to the Texas entire economy. But in the most recent information, that has dropped in half now. And oil and gas is not contributing nearly as much as it once did. They're only contributing now roughly about 10% to the Texas economy. And this research article pointed out that in Texas, even the tourist industry in Texas contributes now more than oil and gas. So very, very interesting information. The one on the right, I also like to highlight, what are we doing? What's happening as far as low carbon transportation? And here's an example, a double-decker electric bus with batteries driving 2,500 miles across the country on public chargers. So interesting things going on there. Just a couple more. I think these are the last two.
Joe, I was just wondering, what are the tourist attractions in Texas?
What are the tourist attractions?
Yeah, I was just wondering if it's a big business.
Sure. So here in Houston, we have NASA, we have Galveston, we have all kinds of things going on, but I'm certainly not the expert on that, John.
Okay.
The Hill Country is a pretty big tourist attraction.
Yeah.
Is it?
The,
So
the,
these
no,
are,
the
a lot of these are
Southwest.
tourists from within Texas. I'm just thinking people outside of Texas coming to Texas. I was wondering how much of that there is.
Yeah.
And, Houston's getting rated very highly nowadays as a city. So it's getting a lot of visibility. Various lists. I've seen it listed.
That's good news.
Yeah.
I'll just finish up really quickly. So the one on the left here is in regard to green hydrogen. And this was an article in a publication called interestingengineering.com, where they said that there are now plans for the world's largest green hydrogen plant to be built in Texas. So I thought that was very interesting. And so I included the hashtags there for our Governor Abbott, John Cornyn, Ted Cruz, and Rep. Dan Crenshaw. Interesting things going on with hydrogen. And on the right, always need to have a lighter side to things. And so the dating website called OkCupid apparently did a study, and they did a poll of everybody that's out there, that's single and looking for a date. And apparently, if you're, not in favor of helping solve climate change, that's definitely a deal breaker for anybody looking for a date. So
All right.
I thought that was interesting. All right, Lori, chapter development.
Well, it's been said by all the good lever leaders, so this is sort of a repeat, but along with welcoming everybody, new members, and making sure you all feel connected. And so if you haven't joined Slack, that's our inner working way we talk to each other in between meetings. So let me know, we can invite you to Slack. But we also, along with these virtual meetings, which may someday come back partially in person, we also like to meet during the month just to meet and greet and do. And so tomorrow is our, you've already heard about it, but Joe Jones, I will do that. Thank you. It is our meet and greet and do. You come by, as Mark invited you, to our table. Find us. It's not big on Discovery Green. You can walk around very easily. We'll have a yellow tablecloth. So, and find us and come meet, and like Mark said, practice talking to people who walk by. It's really easy to get them to write a quick note to their legislator that they care about the climate. And the more our legislators hear from us, the more they're going to move it to the top of their agenda. So, and if you're part of another organization, a house of worship, a neighborhood community, we love to talk about this. We love to get people involved so we can offer guest speakers. And I think, and I also would have welcomed, I was telling people before the meeting started, we got 60 new members this past Friday. And so we always could appreciate help. If you want to help call and welcome people in, just let me know. And I'll put my email in the chat as well. And I think that's it, Joe.
Okay. So we're at the end and we're finishing just on time here. Wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We're going to end the meeting now, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your weekend. Thank you again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bye all.
Great weekend.